the only guy that I ever fought that was taller than me was Sean Woodson, and that guy's 6'2.5", which is absolutely insane. And
download the AllStar app. Make your picks for UFC fights, challenge your friends, level up and win prizes. Link in description. Get it now. April 29th, man, you're back in action in Las Vegas.
yes,
And it's a great place to fight, especially when, you live down the street. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Fernando Padilla, he seems to have a little bit of history with you and your coach.
yeah. I know my coach, one of my coaches, Casey Halstead from 10th Planet, actually used to corner him and used to, help coach him. And so, not that, and this was a long time ago. So like, and Fernando's pretty young. So like, there's, and I actually trained with him, like 5 years ago. Right when I first moved to Vegas, we all carpooled over to Orange County, did some training over there and at Team Oyama, and never really got like actual rounds with him, but we did some drilling together and we're on the mats together. And so, there is a little bit of history, especially, with my coach as well. But it's been, a decent amount of time. So it's not like my coach was coaching him last year or something. It was like, a handful of years ago that he, had coached him and cornered him. So it's not like a huge advantage in that sense. We have a little bit of of understanding because of that, but honestly, there's really not much footage of him. I mean, there's a few fights he has, but a lot of guys like Alex Caceres, my last fight, that guy had, I could go on Fight Pass and get so many fights of his because he's fought so many times in the UFC that there was so much footage on him that we could try to break down. With Fernando, there's a handful of fights, but those were a couple years ago. His last fight was almost 2 years ago. So I feel like even though my coach was had helped him out and coached him before and cornered him, there's really not much that he has out there that's recent.
One thing that's interesting about that is that your coach coached him a long time ago, right? So your coach knows him from that part of his career and his tendencies and his weaknesses, and then he could watch film on him, his most recent film, right? His most recent fights, and maybe pick out things that he sees from back then, right? Is that something that is a possibility?
Yeah, I think nothing specifically that my coach has said, like, oh, he used to do this or he used to do that. But just mainly just on the footage that we're watching, like his last couple of fights, I've watched a few times, and so has my coach who had coached him before, Casey. And so we've gone over that and the mistakes he's made there and kind of the holes in his game from those fights. But nothing like, oh, he's doing this. And I remember he used to do that, and so that's kind of the hole that he has, or he doesn't do that anymore, and he used to do that, and so maybe he's been working on this or working on that. We just look at him just like any other opponent, the footage that they have, this most recent footage, and try to break that down and try to exploit the holes in his game that we've seen in his most recent film. And that's tough because, like I said, his last fight was, almost 2 years ago from when we were going to fight. So that's a little difficult, and it's also like, that's a little I'm curious why he hasn't fought. I don't know if it's visa issues or injury or just whatever. So like I'm kind of curious about that, but it is what it is, and he's still going to step in, and I think it's going to be a little bit more of a detriment on his end because or a disadvantage. What I meant is that it's going to be his UFC debut, and he's coming off of a 2-year layoff, so that can kind of compound the nervousness on his end.
He's just as tall as you, man. You haven't fought many guys just as tall as you. There's not many guys walking around in the division that tall.
Definitely not. The only guy that I ever fought that was taller than me was Sean Woodson, and that guy's 6'2.5", which is absolutely insane. And I follow him on Instagram, and he'll post like his weight and stuff, and the dude doesn't even walk very heavy. It's like the guy just kind of a string bean and is able to do it, and it's pretty incredible you can be that tall. And I mean obviously, like for me, I'm a really tall featherweight, and so is Fernando, but you look at some of these other guys that like there's these anomalies like Sean Woodson, and you're like, how the hell does he do it? just awkwardly built, and just he's got to miss it somewhere. And I think it's in his kind of from the waist down. Sean Woodson's very skinny, and so I think that's kind of how he gets away with it.
For sure. And when you prepare for a guy just as tall as you, is it hard to find training partners that long? Because he has a pretty decent reach as well.
No, not necessarily. I just I'm finding partners that are mainly 55ers, and bigger guys in that sense, because the average featherweight I would say is probably like 5'7.5", 5'8" maybe. So I'm obviously a bit tall. So I try to find my sparring partners and my training partners that resemble his height, as much as I can. I'm probably not gonna find 6'1", but I got some kids that are like 5'11", 5'10", that have long, rangy reaches and fight long too. I don't think Fernando, as tall as he is, he's kind of like me. We both kind of fight shorter than we are. He had a fight with can't remember the kid's name, but he's a short kickboxer. It was 2 fights ago of his at Fury, and the guy was 5'7", kind of stocky built, and that guy was actually kind of getting the better of him in some of the little skirmishes they had with the jab and kind of long punches, because Fernando kind of fights short, and I'm kind of the same way. I don't know why, having all the range that I do have, I like to get into these brawling situations. And I think Fernando does that as well. He also has very, very straight punches, but he comes in and he kind of crowds the pocket a bit as well. So even though he's long and rangy, I think he doesn't use his range like some guys do, like a karate guy or like a kind of an in and out guy. I feel like a guy like Caceres actually is able to use his range better than taller guys like me and Fernando, just by his in and out movement.
I wanted to talk about the Caceres fight a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've gone over this before. You've been finished in fights.
Yeah.
Like recovering from that. Like, did it take any longer, or did it take a quicker time? What's the process of recovering from that stuff, and the doctors as well?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it wasn't too bad. When I got knocked out by Choi, Sung-Woo Choi, a handful of fights ago, they brought me in the back. The doctor was talking to me and trying to ask me the details of the fight, and I couldn't really remember, probably about from right when I walked out till them kind of like ushering me out. And then it took me probably about 30 minutes to start to regain all those memories back. And then I started remembering what had happened. And with Caceres, I remembered everything the entire time. And I think that was because, maybe it was just not as hard of a shot. The kick he caught me with rocked me for sure, kind of flashed me, but I was still aware. And then he was able to follow up with punches. But I think the Sung-Woo Choi fight, I was out a bit more. I think he just had more power behind his shots, and so for me, that was a good sign that I was able to remember everything in the back. I talked to the doctors, and I just remember telling them everything. I could remember my walkout. I mean, even before I couldn't wear, when I fought Choi and I got knocked out, I couldn't remember my walkout song for a second. It took me a while to really remember these things in the back, and this time it wasn't like that, and so I felt better. I felt good about that. Obviously, losing the fight is the biggest thing, for me. I'm just more, my pride was hurt more than me physically. I go in there knowing what can happen. I'm willing to get knocked out to try to knock you out. I'm willing to get choked out, try to choke you out as well. So, that's the game that we play. We got to roll the dice from time to time. And I just felt, almost robbed from a fight because I was so prepared and training so much for that fight. And was on, a really good winning streak. And I felt like that was going to really top it off and, put me, top 15 in the world. So, I put a lot of pressure on myself to win that fight. And I felt like I was starting to get comfortable in it before it ended. And it was a really, kind of a weird delayed kick that he thrown. And, almost maybe like he was kind of surprised that it was able to land and get me out of there like it did. And so I almost felt like I was robbed. Like he almost did a magic trick, and then the fight was over. And so, but hats off to him. Fantastic performance by Alex Caceres, and he was able to do something like that that's how I want to finish a fight. I want to finish a fight with a crazy kick like that. And so for him to do that to me, hats off to him. But I felt like I was robbed for a fight. I wanted to go in there and really mix it up with him, and wasn't able to do that, and wasn't really able to get started. It was a couple minutes into the fight that happened, and so for me, it was just it's one of those things where it gets you way more motivated than just winning fights. After the Dawodu fight, like winning 3 fights in a row against tough guys, you just like stop thinking that there's really anything to work on, kind of like, if that makes any sense. Like, you're just like, oh, I went out there and did what I needed to do. Like, I just keep this train rolling. But when you go out there and you lose, it really makes you rethink everything. Like, you're like, man, do I even belong here? Like, after the Caceres fight, I'm like, do I just not even do I not deserve to be here or something? It's like, even after winning 3 fights in a row against tough guys, you're questioning yourself. And so I think that's, the biggest benefit from losing a fight is being able to learn from what you've done through that camp and take that to the next camp, but also really break things down and reevaluate certain things. When you're winning fights, it's all good. You just you don't really take away as much as you can if you don't have to. But when you lose a fight, it really gets you motivated to try to fix those little details and not make those mistakes again.
Yeah, I just look at that as perfect timing, perfect speed. It was just the perfect shot, man. Yeah. And it was just it's like the ones that you don't see coming, they're the ones that hit, right? And basically that's what it was. You know what I mean? And that's the way I look at it as well. You know what I mean? So, people will talk shit, but it's like, yo, you step in there, even a guy that's not even close to that level, and you're gonna get smashed up, dude. Like, seriously.
And the thing about that, it's like, people are gonna say what they're gonna say. I have so much respect for anybody that steps in the cage, even if it's your first fight ever. Up from your first fight all the way to a UFC champion, and anywhere in between. If you have, stepping into a cage to fight another human is it's nerve-wracking. Even before I started fighting, I got into some street fights when I was younger, and those things were your adrenaline's pumping, you're nervous, you're like, anything can happen. This is sketchy. What the fuck am I doing? So you gotta to be able to go out there and fight, win, lose, or draw, to step into the cage and at least just go for it. I have so much respect for those people, and it just sucks when you got people who've never done it before or never even tried to do it before. That like to talk shit and make these burner accounts and just talk shit. And it's and so you can't pay that no mind. Those guys wish they had the courage that a lot of other people have to do these kind of things. But and I don't necessarily think that I'm more courageous than anybody else. This is something I love to do, and if it's not your cup of tea, by all means, you shouldn't be fighting. It's an acquired taste. It's like mustard. I hate mustard, but I love to get punched in the face. So, if you're not into that kind of thing, by all means, don't do it. But you shouldn't discount people that are doing it, even if they are losing. If you're out there and you're doing it, especially in the UFC, man, if you've made it here, you've already made it past a lot of the mediocre guys, and you've been tested. So to be in the UFC, amongst some of the best in the world, it really shows the caliber and the amount of time and effort you've put into this.
Oh, without a doubt, man. It's easier to get in a street fight than step into a cage, because the cage, you got everything, the whole process of everything that you have to go through to just actually fight. You know what I mean? It's just, that's the crazy part, man.
Exactly.
What are you expecting in this one, man? I think it's an interesting matchup because you guys are both tall, you guys are both long. Like you said, you guys kind of fight low. There's a lot of things that could happen. What do you see?
Yeah, he's kind of a 10th planet jiu-jitsu guy. He kind of plays off his back. He's really kind of Gumby. But I train with a lot of these guys out here. I train at 10th planet, and so we have a lot of these guys. I like to use rubber guard, dead orchards, and stuff like that. And I know that's what he's really he's very skillful at. He likes to play off his back, but I'm not a go in there and take you down, ground and pound kind of guy. I like to stand and trade. And I can see from his previous fights, he likes to do the same. He's one of those guys that's willing to stand and trade. And then once it hits the ground, he's also down to grapple as well. So I honestly feel like my advantage is going to be kind of in the pace of the fight. And so I want to keep it standing. and just kind of put the pressure on him. Like, and that's always kind of my game plan. Even with the Caceres fight, I wanted to pressure him and get it to the later part of the fight, and get it into the third round, get him to where they start questioning themselves. Like I watched Fernando's fight like 2 fights ago when he fought that shorter kickboxing kid, and he slightly won he won one of the first rounds pretty decisively, and the second round was pretty close, but the third round the other kid won, and you could tell Fernando was starting to break. He was starting to get winded, getting tired. He took a couple leg kicks, and he was being very defensive. And for me, I feel like I'm the opposite. I start off a bit slow and end up getting stronger as the fight goes on. I feel like Fernando does the opposite of that. So as long as I can kind of weather the first part of it, like weather the storm, I don't necessarily think he has like knockout one-shot power in his hands. But I said that also about Caceres. But just like I said before, it's like he could touch me on my chin, I'd go down too. So I got to be prepared for everything. But I think if I can stay defensively sound on the feet for the first half of the fight, I think the second half is going to be mine, and I think I can find a finish towards the later half of this fight by just kind of exhausting him and pushing the pace on him and kind of making him give up.
April 29th, UFC Fight Night in Las Vegas. Go in the descriptions, download the AllStar app. Julian, thank you so much, man, for the time. And all the best in this one. This one is an interesting matchup because of the height, man. I always look at like the physicality of these matchups, man. It's interesting.
It's gonna be one of those things where like when you get someone like just the hobbyist people that don't really they just watch UFC for the fun of it or whatever, and they're like they don't really understand the weight classes or like know what the weight class is. They're gonna see both of us in there and they're gonna be like, these guys are so tall. They're gonna think we're like middleweights. Like what weight do these guys fight on? This one's gonna be like 145. They're gonna be like, what the hell? 145? These guys are huge. Plus TV ads it makes everybody look way bigger than they are. So it's gonna be a fun one. I'm looking forward to it. And I can't wait. Thank you.